Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Self-Reg Show. We are so happy to be here with you. This is our first episode that we're filming on the bright side of the winter-spring change. We're into spring. How are you feeling?
Are you sure about that?
Oh, I know. And Stuart's saying that because yesterday we had a blizzard and I had thunder and lightning. It was crazy, really crazy. But we're a couple of days away from April as we film this. You'll see it later in April. And just, really, really feeling spring. Or I am. Are you, Stuart?
Well, this morning my day started off. We make our own maple syrup, and usually we would have pulled all the taps around a week ago. And it's so cold that we're thinking at least another week of winter here,
I
which
always
means more sap.
I always like to think of, there's that debate about is the cup half empty or
Yeah,
half.
another. There you go.
And, but there's another way of thinking about that because cup half full sounds like it's just positivity. And I think I often think of you, it's in a way, it's more than that. It's not just, looking at the brighter side. It's like, yeah, you said this to me the other day, more sap, another thing is sap, right? So I've had some of your syrup. It's pretty
Oh,
fabulous.
did you like it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
first run.
Ginny, Stuart's wife, gave me some the other day. Yeah, the first run, it's
Yeah.
yeah, and those of you who have done courses with us in the past have probably seen the smoke rising from what looks like a cauldron. I had people say, "You should really tell us what that is," back
Yeah.
then. And it was your older maple syrup making equipment. Well, we are on to a really cool topic today for the episode of the Self-Reg Show. And we're going to take, for those of you that have been following our journey in the last, I think, 10 episodes, I think this is number 11, and Stuart's before that. He did another podcast for us as well. But those of you following the journey, it's been really anchored in a bit of science, some long-standing science that links to self-reg or is part of self-reg in some way, and some surprises, and then conversations about that. And this week we're going to be taking a hiatus from science, although I'm here with
No.
well, I'm here with Stuart, so there is bound to be a bit of science dropping in here somewhere. But we're really thinking today's episode. We were thinking about leaders, educational leaders, and I'm using the word educational on purpose. Those of you working in the early childhood fields, thank you. We honor you, and much of this is can equally apply, just like those in the post-secondary field. We're going to have a very cool updated episode coming with news for all of you that are interested in what's going on in universities and colleges, whether you're working in them, you're hiring out of them, you have kids going to them. There is some really cool news and stuff coming up ahead. But today we're just going to be really thinking about schools, and I want to talk, Stuart, a little bit today about self-reg and the things that we've learned along the way from folks in schools and school leaders. Just before I turn it over to you for a couple of first words before we start our convo here today, our conversation, I want to just frame that when I say a leader, I don't necessarily mean a principal or a director of a center or what have you. I really mean leaders of all different kinds, and some leaders have people that report to them. There's leaders in schools that are not just principals, they're vice principals, but those working in that are supporting children. I had a title of program support, which is like a special education role in a school a couple of decades ago now, but that was a leadership role because I was supporting people in the school. I also worked as, when I went back into the classroom after my stint as a VP and realizing that wasn't where my heart was, at least not in the model that was set up in the school where I was a VP. I was a classroom teacher, but I became an informal leader. I was a mentor to others. I was collaborating, but sort of became known as a bit of an informal leader. So leaders take all kinds, and there's all different forms. And although this conversation specifies thinking about self-reg and what we know in schools and what we've seen and heard and learned from others, it really applies to anybody that is a self-reg champion and trying to champion a bit of change, a bit of growth, a bit of new thinking and applying of the science in their context. So, where would you like, or how would you like to respond to that, Stuart? Before I dive in more.
I'm really glad that you qualified what we mean by leaders. I was thinking that right at the start. Way back when I was traveling everywhere in Canada and visiting all sorts of schools, um, over and over, I was struck by how, in one school, the leader was the custodian. In another, it was the receptionist. In another, it was one of the school bus drivers. And in many, it was the principal. That's absolutely true. But it wasn't only the principal. And I can't remember, I don't believe you were at this meeting, but I had this wonderful meeting up in Rainy River. And they brought in the principal, Shannon. I've forgotten her last name now. Um, and I can't remember, was it in Rainy River or Dryden, but it was one of those places,
Dryden.
Dryden. And Shannon she was the principal, and she brought in this team to meet with me, to have a workshop with me. And ever since then, it's been in my mind, my model of a school leader. At this meeting, she had every single member of the staff, all of the teachers, and she had a couple of students. So,
Oh,
yeah,
neat.
yeah.
Shannon is now a superintendent
Is she?
in their district in Quat Patricia, and she's a big supporter of our work, and we're a big supporter of her.
Yeah.
I love that you started with that story because here is another story that actually links to that. And I don't know, we made the connection years ago, Stuart, but I don't know if you'll recall. So I just have to frame everything because Stuart started us in a great place. He talked about a school leader, and that was Shannon, who was a principal at the time, and
Yes.
very respected principal. But also incredible at collaborating with others.
With a terrific director.
Yeah, with a terrific director as well, and Sean has moved on, but
Mhm.
I'm sure he's still greatly missed. They did some
Yeah.
amazing things, but here's the backstory to that example that you just shared. So that would have been in 2016, maybe 2017, probably 2016, and I went in before you did. I went in with Linda Warren, who used to be she's retired and enjoying grandkids now, but the two of us went into that district, and we worked in a number of different schools. And I have a memory of sitting at a table. It would have been in the library, just like you did, little people chairs. And I loved my time at that school. And I'm sitting around with the team. So we've spent a day or 2 days maybe at this school. And there's lots of self-reg-ish things, and then they've since gone on to do a lot more. I remember that there were a lot of like calming corners and things like that,
Yeah.
and it was important, but there's more to it as well. So, but we're sitting around this table, and we're talking, and the joy in this group, the cohesion of
Yes.
the team. There's research around that, by the way, that there's the cohesion of the team is reflected
Yeah.
in suspensions and things like that, right? And it
Yeah.
makes sense. Those of you that are working in the early years, you know that the kids pick up what's going on between the staff, right?
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I've worked in places with other languages, right? So in the Clicho, it's Clicho language, but I've also worked in Italy, and I remember in the Italy example, in the school I was had up to two years old as well, and they made a policy that they couldn't that to be conscious of speaking in front of the kids in English or Italian because they picked it up, right? So I'm
Yeah.
just passing that along because that's all
Yeah.
really interesting and relevant
Yeah.
to leadership and a self-reg. But the thing I remember about this meeting, and I can still even see where I'm sitting. Isn't that fascinating how things get anchored in our, etched into our brain? It was so positive and so much energy. And they were like, they went over and
Yep.
above how they greeted kids and they walked
Yep.
in
Yep.
school. And there was a lot of trauma in this school. A
Yep.
lot was not, a lot of people think they're in a really hard school. This was a really hard school.
Yep.
And just the joy and always trying to figure out what more can I do? What more can I do? And then this teacher who was a grade 1 teacher, uh, and she said to me, so we're sitting around the table, and all of a sudden she starts talking about one kid, and she says this kid, and everybody's body language changed, right?
Yeah.
And it was just instant. You could feel this. She went rigid is the thing that I noticed, and she was on the other end of the table of me. And this was one of these people that were around the table were there by choice. So that's a good thing to add. That this team that Shannon put together were all there by choice, and so they had the spirit. And I was in this classroom as well. I saw it, and the kindergarten was fabulous. I was in it and I saw it. But she went rigid when she started talking about this kid, and it was very, very clear that that this was a really challenging kid. Okay, so I don't want to downplay that. They said, they and everybody was nodding, right? I'm not sure Shannon was, but definitely some of the other teachers were. Yeah, difficult kid, and just there's no reaching him. And basically, the kid, from what I recall, I'm sure the details aren't exact, but he would sit at the back of the class whenever they would do certain subjects. He'd be okay until he wasn't, right? That kind of limbic priming. He had those signs that you used to talk about. I think you still do, McEwen stuff, of allostatic overload, which I always think of. It's just that 0 to 500 in 2 seconds flat, takes forever to come back down, overreacts, and was sort of volatile. And the volatile was aggressive with friends and peers, but also a closed, and he would say things like rude things to the teacher. And she just did not know what to do with this kid. And so it was really an interesting moment because this whole team shifted, and without realizing it, had shifted to talking about the bad kid. Now, you got to hear this, people. These were good people, loving educators. They're, chosen this profession on purpose. Actually, a great deal of Shannon's work went into taking care. She was worried about vicarious trauma. She was worried about the team and all that kind of stuff, and trying to take care of, because when we take on the load of kids, it's a lot, and it has to go somewhere. So she was really trying to take care of the team as well as she could, so they could take care of others. But it was really interesting. They didn't use that language, of course, and they spoke respectfully. Uh, but that can show up in all kinds of ways.
Yeah.
And so, I don't always have the right questions. I've learned a lot from you. Ask a good question, which you told me you learned from your dad. But so I started asking questions. And what happened wasn't just different answers, then that led us down a path. They did, but I watched their body. Like I wasn't even realizing I was doing it, but I felt a change. It was like everybody stopped breathing in the room, right? And so I
That's
started
good.
asking. I learned that this kid. So they told me right away that in kindergarten, he had done better. And so the kindergarten teacher she was really up on Ontario curriculum. So her room was very play based. It had all kinds of different areas in it. She was very, there was a lot of child led space for all of this. And he tended to do better there. Although she still, she had him, I should say, the year before. And then and he had tended to do better there. But she also made space for, a meltdown. You got to go put your head on a pillow. You go put your head on a pillow kind of thing, right? And so there was this idea. The the grade 1 had a different feel for it. But there was this idea, like it is a deterministic idea that was, developmentally, maybe he wasn't ready for kindergarten, was sort of the hidden idea. And then we get talking, and I ask questions, and I'm like, okay, so what happened between so he was pretty good in kindergarten. And then in grade 1, what happened? Oh, he went away to another community. And they knew that it wasn't by choice. So I'll leave out the details, but it wasn't by choice. And he was living with grandparents. and that he had moved to a small community, and now he was back. So that was a piece of the puzzle. And not to do any don't be stuck on that. That is just an opportunity for you to find the compassion and notice, okay, this kid clearly has a heavier backpack. Then he came back, and there's no friend groups, so he doesn't have friend groups. And it gets turned around that the kids are afraid of him, but he doesn't have friend groups. But the magic was, asking the teacher about her relationship with him. And here's what I saw, Stuart. I saw this magic where she said, I try. And all of a sudden she said, I've tried so hard, and I know he's had a rough go, and I just don't know what to do. It was such a heavy pro-social stress on her
Uh-huh.
to not be able to connect with this kid. And in a way, you once years ago, when I used to feel bad about how I responded to my daughter when she would cry with leg pains in the middle of the night, and I would do my best to do the right things, but I would feel all rigid. And you said, it's the stress of not being able to soothe her. It was very much that helped me. And this was very much about this teacher not being able to connect. And then you stop trying. You kind of make it about the
That's a good
kid.
story.
Those walls are really high. And it didn't have all the answers, but until we see differently, and her body language just changed. I did my best to protect so that there's no blaming. This wasn't blame. This was like an aha moment, right? And beginning, because they were working on a solution of having him spend half days in kindergarten. That's nice if it's a safe space. It's not necessarily, and this was a smaller community, but why are we doing that? And we're assuming he can't do, he actually was capable of a lot more. So the reason I share that story
That's a good story.
is because you went a month after me, and you came back and you told me, you're never going to believe this kid that I saw. You went in, and we're in this grade 1 class, and you said you wouldn't believe how they're dealing. And it was the kid, right? It was the
Yeah,
same,
that's
it
great.
was the same classroom. You told me about this teacher who was amazing. And all of that fell under leadership. So we did not plan to go there with that story, folks. We don't plan much except for our topic, occasionally a couple of questions. But yeah, what a lovely way to start.
So I do remember that kid.
I bet you
Um,
can see his face.
yes, I can. You know, I should tell everyone I'm under orders here not to do science, so I won't. But
Well, you can do a little bit if you need to.
no, I'm going to do it in a sort of general way. Susan and I are just um, beginning a new series, a new course, which will be pretty heavy in the science, and um, we're looking at really deep systems. And there's a very simple question here. Why are we doing this? Why are we um, why are we pushing self-reggers to learn about these deep subcortical systems? And it's an essential part of reframing. And what I mean by that is, in this little boy that Susan's describing, when you begin to understand the various things that have gone on high alert in his brain, how these systems shut down other higher functions, things like listening, things like feeling empathy, things like being calm. You see, and this is the famous self-reg dictum, you're seeing the child differently. You actually see a different child. So our dictum is, see the child differently, you see a different child. And here, seeing differently means, it's sort of like having x-ray vision. You understand that these behaviors are telling you something about what's going on, um, deep, deep, deep. And you realize that what this child needs from me at this moment is that child needs security. That's what all these systems are telling me. That child needs me to be there. That child doesn't need me to explain anything. And in fact, if you try explaining stuff to a kid that's in this state, that's a stress too. It's a stress just listening. And, I'm sure every parent knows exactly what I'm describing here. When your child is, let's say, in red grade, they don't want an explanation. They certainly don't want a lecture. They just want us to maybe not even touch them, just be there, quiet, or hold them, or stroke their arm, whatever. But all they need, their needs, have really, in neural terms, regressed to the needs of a baby, of an infant. They need just comfort. So here's this little guy that Susan's describing, and he's been through, some pretty tough, stressful, a very stressful experience. He's come back. He doesn't have that peer group that he needs, and what's happened to him is um, he can't by himself turn off his alarm. He can't turn off his amygdala. He needs us to do it. And we don't turn off the amygdala by um, you know talking to him about what he needs to do. We just have that simple interbrain presence. Okay. One of the points I wanted to make today is I have seen the most extraordinary response from self-reg leaders. Our kids have gone through a pretty harrowing time, a time that's not that dissimilar to what Susan just described, a time when they've been stripped of their peer group. When they do have peer interaction, the peers are hyper aroused, so not a source of co-regulation, but instead a source of ramping it up. They've been frightened, they've been overstressed, they've been made to be alone, all these things. And our school leaders have responded in the most, at least the ones I'm familiar with, in the most extraordinary way. I never dreamt that they could do this. They have been exactly what I'm describing now. I have a younger boy with pretty severe ADHD, and he took COVID pretty hard. And his teachers, VP, principal, what they have done with him is simply been there for him, made him aware that they are there for him. They're not trying to, force him back into doing well in school. And by the way, he's doing it on his own. As what they've done is trying to reduce the stress of coming back, reduce the stress of tackling a subject. And that's what I saw in this school, that these self-reggers had stopped trying, you know, you know, it's a very self-controlist approach. We're gonna get him to behave properly. Instead, all they were doing was being there, comforting him, reducing where they could, relaxing where they could. And I have seen this. Um, I won't mention. Well, let me mention one name. So the director of my kids, of my younger boys' school district, is Renee Russo, and she has been the most extraordinary source of self-reg leadership. And you can feel this filtering down through every single staff member, teacher that my kid is coming in contact with. And I'm seeing this now from the stuff you send me. I'm seeing this across the country. So um, I am inspired. I was inspired by how those teachers in Dryden um, sucked you and me dry. They were so that's pro-social drive, and I am inspired by the way our school leaders are reaching out to us, reaching out to me, to me and you. Give us more, tell us more, teach us more. Um, I hope you're going to tell me that we're about to do that.
We are. And I have to just tell you, if you saw me look away, it was because I was checking my phone. I have the same director of education for my daughter. I knew it wasn't Renee Russo because she was in a film.
Oh, it's not. Wait,
It's Rita. It's Rita Russo.
yeah, Renee Russo is an actress. You're quite right.
Yeah. But I had to look that all up.
Sorry, Rita.
She's been a director for a couple of years,
I
and
like
I
Renee Russo too.
emails, and there's lots of progress and yeah, that's funny. Equity, and it's interesting to see where the years will lead it. But I share Stuart's hope, and we're going to end today talking about taking care of leaders and educators and our own well-being too, because I just want to that this we're not bottomless pits. I always think of myself as a teacher first. So if I say we,
No,
that's
no,
for
no,
me,
no. That's great.
not bottomless pits, and we need to think about that as well. But I'm just going to share a couple of things, and invite all of you that are, especially if you're listening as a parent. I hear lots of parents that are really concerned about what goes on in schools and not seeing the self-reg that we're talking about, and it can be really hard as a parent. I get it personally, and yet the progress is forward. And I really think we need to always remember that showing up at that job every day, especially
Yep,
right now, is not an easy job.
yep,
And when we
yep.
understand, just like even that teacher, when I was sitting at that table that day,
Yep.
that there was something more going on, because that wasn't who she was.
That's
So
good.
why did the lockup come? Like, why do we go more self-control? Why do we hear these, or even have really good people who maybe know some of the science, and then we're doing detentions, and we're doing, I don't know, whatever versions of things that we're doing to solve problems. We revert to that self-control. It's all in the kid, and it's something that's going on in our brain and body too, right? So you really
Yes.
got to start there. In self-reg, we're never talking about a free-for-all. So if you think we're saying, oh, you just threw a rock through the school window, no problem, you have a rough life. No, you threw a rock through the window, we got to deal with that. And I know that's not you. You're not okay. Right? And what can we do? What can we do with the resources we have? Because sometimes you can hear this and you're like, everybody else needs to. And my one challenge there is, yeah, and advocate and ask and refer and all those things. But what are we doing? Because each one of us is in front of kids. If you're a leader, you're in front of adults. What are we doing with our little sphere of influence? Because it can really make a huge difference. So I wanted to share, Stuart. I just thought, this is not any scientific or any research process, but I wanted to share with you just a couple of things that I've noticed self-reg leaders do differently. I have a list that they've told us that I'll share with you. We'll be sure to put
I
up this.
hadn't heard this.
No, because I just thought about it this morning when I was trying to think. I'm like, okay, what do I notice differently? And I feel kind of
Interesting.
privileged and in the know right now. Well, I know there's so many school leaders that are some of them are part of our team. They facilitate courses or whatever, but I know, but also being able to work out there helps keep my feet grounded. But I have the honor of, maybe we'll do a podcast. I'm hoping she will, but one of a principal that we both have a lot of respect for, Kathy Lethbridge. We met her as a principal, then she went on to a district position, and she's back as a principal this year. And so it's sort of that some conversations with her about how she's going through it, like what is her approach. And we're putting together something for you for this summer symposium, so you'll get to learn. She's giving a talk, but we'll also have some guidelines of things that she's learned in her first year, so that has helped me as well. But these are just sort of top of the mind things that come to mind. So one of them is, so I have 5 that I just wanted to share. And so one of them is that they really it has to be knowing some of the science. You don't need to know all of this. I can't parrot off what Stuart teaches, but I get the story. And they know there is more going on, and they really look at themselves, um, as sometimes we talk about it as making the weather. I think I heard that first from Jean Clinton, but also it's a culture of the school, right? Really seeing
Yeah.
that, being the visionary, the hope. This isn't the, oh, I've got all this. This is okay. We're setting the tone in the school. And look, in that sick situation, it's not all roses. Sometimes you've got to deal with some things very directly, respectfully, and all of those things. So that's one of them. And really seeing the kids differently, and when the adults don't, helping them see those kids differently, and bringing those same soft eyes to the adults that are struggling as we do to the kids. So that's one. The second one that I've noticed is linked to, I think I just kind of said that, but they really see Self-Reg as being part of all they do with their HR hat. So HR is time consuming. We have shortages everywhere, hiring, trying to fill, like it's unbelievable what COVID has done to this. But even pre-COVID, it's a lot of work for leaders, and especially when you're trying to get everybody making the same movie, but people come with their different belief systems, and so really taking an HR lens. So what does that mean? It means, okay, I'm going to put on a staff meeting. Okay, maybe you're going to bring coffee and nibbles. What else? Right? Are you going to sit and talk for an hour straight at the end of an 8-hour day with kids? Right? How do we go about that? How do we allow for voices to be heard? How do we make it really shared responses? So really taking an HR lens. What do we do when someone's off sick? And maybe it's again and again and
That's
again. And
right.
how do we make that person feel? And
Yeah.
how do we protect them from all of those sorts of things? It goes with, if you've got a gossip problem in your school, see that as a sign of stress and not cohesion. What can you do about it? You can come down with the hammer. What else can you do? Right? And sometimes it's not anything directly. Sometimes it's giving your team an opportunity to do something that's not head to head, right? I had my boss when I was a direct, I guess, a coordinator at the ministry in. I laugh. You're going to understand why I laugh in a second. But in the Northwest Territories, I guess it was when I was a director, and so the deputy minister and the minister, the deputy minister and the assistant deputy minister, they hosted a night at one of the. They were both foodies, and they invited us all to come to be fed and watered. But even just the language of fed and watered, right? Like, and it was just a dinner. Another time we went on the land for our leadership work, and one of the rules was we weren't allowed to bring flip charts. And yes, we did some planning, but we also did some other things. So these, I know you don't all have those opportunities, but what can you do? It's always about what.
That's great. I loved your DM.
She was a firestorm. My associate, it was the associate DM. There was an ADM and an associate DM was a character too. So they both long retired. So number 3 is a really a key one, and it is I'd like to put it like, go where the light is. This is not an idea that's original for me. There was a book that influenced me years ago, that was I think was 10 things that great principals do differently. I think it's Todd Cunningham, and 10 things that great teachers do differently. And so it's just the gist of his idea. He spoke at a conference I was at recently and really talked about changing culture of the school. And so that's what this Rita Russo is trying to do, changing the culture to be more inclusive in the whole KP, in the whole district where we are. But it is, and it's we tend to want to work on the ones that struggle the most. We do that as teachers, remediate. And often the kids that need the best quality pedagogy or higher level, get the remediation. So we go in. So this is the opposite. You deal with what you've got to deal with as a leader. You have to deal with things that are outside of whatever is the expectations, and you deal with those the way you need to deal with them, right? But this is saying, don't try to convince. I like the hamburger model of leadership. You do wherever you can get it in the top of the bun, a little bit in a staff meeting, in the strategic plan, 10 minutes at part of your staff meetings, all of those things you do. One leader I have a lot of respect for with us is Kim. She used to make, if anybody brought a behavior challenge and we need another assistant for this kid. Yes,
Yeah.
sometimes you do. But before you do, let's sit down and talk about it. And she would insist that they read something self-reg before they came and had the conversation. She said, I will have this conversation with you. You
That's
need
great.
to blog or this, which
I didn't know Kim did that. That's great.
yeah, oh yeah, for sure. So but so you do that at the top level, but this cannot be a top down. It is grassroots is
Mhm.
where that's where the change happens. I don't want you to forget that top layer matters, and we've learned that the hard way. Places where it was all grassroots, and there's not the support of whatever whoever you're reporting with, that can only last so long. So you need both, but you can't top down this, and nor should you, to be honest with you, from a self-reg science lens, nor should you. So the magic is in the grassroots. And so the third thing that they really do, like I've talked a lot there, but is they focus on the people who want it. I saw a great video Claudio did, Claudio Mascala, another principal, on the Pearson website. We'll see if we can link the video for you to see, where he talked about hearing us talk about this at a conference we did in Toronto some years ago. And it was like, well, where do I start? Start with the ones whose eyes light up. So that's what he said he did. He went in and did a staff meeting, and he saw the crossed arms, and but then he looked for the and those were the ones you pay the attention to. And it's not ignoring the others, but notice the ones, facilitate their learning, amplify their voice. And that is the third one that I notice. The fourth one I notice is that they don't separate pedagogy and curriculum and learning um, from self-reg. So it's not this is an add-on for well-being or mental health or safe schools, like they do it in all these different ways. But this is also, about it integrates with absolutely everything. And the fifth one is one that I know, well, even I still work on, but they also realize this is about them as well. And so they're working on their own self-reg, and they're always trying to notice, okay, oh, I went a little red brain there. I went, it's like, why is this one triggering me? And always trying to do the work. Many are able to be vulnerable and tell some of their own stories, which you don't have to do that, but it's one of the best ways to connect with people when they realize, a lot of stuff, but you're also acknowledging you're human. So those are my five. How would
Well,
you like to go on
that's
to
just, that's
that?
just wonderful.
What have you noticed?
Um, you know, when you were going through your list, it reminded me of something. So I got mentored by Stanley Greenspan, and it reminded me of an experience that I once had. Um, we were in Stan's office with two parents and their child. The child was around 3 or 4, um, verbal autistic, but all sorts of problems. And Stanley was talking to the parents. And after the session, I said to him something like, I didn't understand what the father meant when he said such and such. And Stanley looked at me a bit surprised. He said, "The father said that?" And I said, "Yeah, when you said such," he then asked, "Oh, did he?" And I said, "Were you not listening?" I can't remember how I said it, but I said, "Were you not listening to what he said?" And Stanley's answer was, "No, not at all. I was listening to how he said it."
Wow.
Yeah, it was, for me, that was a real, and I've used that. So my older boy has autism, and when he goes red brain, he can say some pretty hurtful things, and I never hear them. All I hear is, he's still just a kid, and I just hear that voice that's saying, uh, "I need help." And what I have noticed is the self-reg leaders are listening to the kids' voice. They are listening to what Susan said right at the start today. They're listening to those limbic utterances. They're listening to, and the ones that are doing the best, it strikes me, they're the ones who realize these are just kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're, and these are kids whose brains are nowhere near finished developing, especially the parts of the brain that we think when they start to speak, they should have full control. They should have self control. Well, that's not going to happen until the mid 20s, if then. What they realize is that when a kid is overwhelmed, they can't handle the stress on their own. They need me to be that co-regulating force until they can return to that calm balanced state and learn why they threw the rock, that you don't throw the rock, that you don't hit others. But in order for them to truly learn and to feel all of these, we have these wonderful, I'm trying to think of a way of saying this that's non-scientific. We get these wonderful feelings when we do nice things, when we do kind things, when we are considerate. Those reactions are blocked when we are overwhelmed, when we are overstressed, especially when you're a kid. And so they don't ever see a bad kid. They don't ever see a lazy kid or a stupid kid. They see a child, and they see a child that has become dysregulated for reasons that I may never even know. And they help that child restore balance. And now I just finished by picking up on the last thing that Susan just said. It's not just a case of, the cobbler needs to tend to their own shoes. By helping that child experience those neurochemicals that feel good, they will get the same neurochemicals. They will have, that's how our brain was designed. The very act of helping the child feel this gives it to us. The surest way to not help the child feel that, help ourselves feel that, is to go self control. Self control is the ultimate maladaptive way of dealing with things. So that's what I see, that's what I feel, and that's what I mentioned before. I find very inspiring to see the impact that TMC is having, um, even on those who initially resisted us.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, for me, this is very exciting. It's I don't know. I This has been a tough period. You go through tough periods, and to see, um, I don't know, people like Kathy uh, influencing a much wider population than the parents of the kids that are in her school now. That for me is what you and I dreamt about. 9 years ago now, 10 years ago.
You sent the team. We always do messages for our team right before. Well, it's right before Christmas, but we have people of all different faiths and backgrounds, and so it's sort of a year-end message from us. And your message this year was, you give me hope and you give me purpose.
Yep.
It's why we do this. I want to just end on one note. So those of you out there, like how, and if you felt yourself hearing that and wanting to be there, but thinking, oh, there's this whole readiness before I'm ready for that. It's exact opposite. And I have to tell you, even like today, all I still find moments where I jump to it's, oh, you need to be more motivated. And those are just okay, why and why now? And I have to remind myself. So
Oh,
it's
that's
it's
good.
constant work. But here's one of the magic things that I think needs to happen in schools. And the bottom line is, we talk about self-reg havens. You're not going to get there, and you're not going to get there until we change. One of the things that someone here, one of the principals said in this list that I have that will be linked to this video, was changing mindsets, but it's heart sets. And you're not going to get everybody, and don't be afraid of resistance. There's lots of research out there that resistance actually, welcome it. It's telling you something. It doesn't mean that you need to stop, talking, helping people understand it, but it's that drip, drip, drip effect, right? So that, you really, until we can see differently, that's why reframing is the very first step of self-reg. And if we don't reframe, if we're not able to see beyond it was choice, I find that many people find it very easy for some kids and impossible for that other kid, the one with the
Yep.
smirk, or the one who says, yeah, I hit him because it
Yep.
was
Yep.
fun,
Yeah, yeah.
right? How do I see that? Well, we got to do it, right? But the key is, like, we think, oh, that means going soft. No, it means absolutely the opposite. It means letting that language go. But it's like, what and what now? What am I going to do? That child needs to feel not alone, that teenager, whatever. But you're thinking, oh, it doesn't make the school safe. It makes it safer. What we're doing right now is we seem to have, some of you have a tiered approach. Okay. We don't necessarily talk tons and tiers, but self-reg can fit in there. It's not a program. And the tiers, sort of the three tiers, with the base being the universal, the second being some interventions. Everything we do is an intervention, right? But some interventions, and the third is, we call them the specialists, basically. Well, we've skipped, in so many of these challenging areas, we skip straight to number three. Ask any person in a supporting role how many referrals they're getting, and they're run off their feet. And
Yeah.
that is a piece of it, and you might say funding, funding, funding. Yeah. I'm not against more funding, more people. I think that's important too. But we're missing the universal level. And I've seen it with my own eyes. We have a research network that is that we're going to be part of. That's evolving, and we'll share more with you on a future episode. But what happens when you take this universal approach? I'm not a scientist. I'm not a clinician. But I can connect with every child. I can try, keep that. We're seeing way less behaviors, way less need for that intervention. You still need some. But what happens when we get the universal level right? When that kid walks in and says, I got that security Stuart talks about. And if you've got one that you never see that, or they run off run off their feet. Okay, what more can I do? I often like to think about, okay, what would happen if someone else was in there observing? What other things would you notice? How do you start your day? How do you introduce new ideas? What happens when something goes wrong? A meteor lands in your backyard. What happened to your curriculum for that day? That kind of thing, right? Know your curriculum, but there's more to it. So it really is working at the universal level, and there is always more we can do. More we can do in the environments, where more we can do in the relationships, more we can do in, what do we do when they're late? What do we do when they get in a fight? How are our discipline protocols? How do we deal with things that maybe cries? You may notice that there's a child in need. We believe them, first of all, that there's something more going on. And look, some of them show us in the most unloving ways. Those are the kids that need us the most. So it really is looking at the universal level. I highly recommend you consider, if this has sparked your interest and you're like, how? We're not a program, but it's Self-Reg as a framework, offers all kinds of strategies, all kinds of tools, all kinds of paths. We have the Self-Reg Schools Handbook and the Self-Reg Schools course, which our next cohort starts May 5th. And Kathy Lethbridge, that we've been singing her praises, is the facilitator for that course. you're with other leaders in different roles, so you can come and learn a lot more. So those are two opportunities for you to learn more. But the biggest one is thinking, okay, where do I start? Where do I start? And starting by learning a bit of the science, learning a bit more so that you can recognize stress behavior, so that you can recognize when you slip into
That's good.
self-control, so that you can recognize, okay, this person does not need me to sit them down and reprimand. This person needs to feel felt first. And then all of those things, will come along. And how can I move my team along? But I have to do it in ways that, just looking at this list here, one of them is we need to be invited in. Okay, that's that top, that hamburger bun thing of who's asking for it. Someone's struggling with a kid. Okay, let's sit down and think about this in different ways, right? Amplifying the difference makers, recognizing, working on shifting mindsets, taking care of our own self-reg is on this list, encouraging, validating what people are already doing. That's another huge one. Lots self-reg can be used to be explain what's working. You're like, they don't want the language. Okay, find me an educator who's doing a great job, who actually is handling these kids just fine. Let's go have a look. And if you know enough self-reg, you can explain it through this self-reg, right? It's there, it's there, it's there. So I'm going to end it and give you the last line, Stuart. Leaders, educators, whether you're in the early years schools, anywhere in any kind of system, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for all that you are. And please, we invite you to come and join and learn more with us if we've sparked your interest today.
Well, I just want to add one more group to encourage parents to take the school leadership course as well. And if you're a parent and you want to be a part of the school's culture, or you want to help change the school's culture in the ways that Susan's described today, come and take this course. Be that be that positive influence, not just for your own kid, but for all of these kids. Um, and I also see that happening. I see just this morning, Rob, who Susan knows really well, was all excited because one of the teachers, his kid also goes to our school district, and one of the teachers has very kindly taken on his daughter's problems in math, and the kid now loves math.
Wow.
And he was just so happy. And he said to me, "Boy, this self-reg stuff is really great." So we should get Rob on the.
I love that you've shared that. I'm going to make sure this goes out on our parenting Facebook group. Sometimes people can be very frustrated, and how do
Yeah.
you change? And it's one conversation at a time. And
Yes.
honestly, parents, don't feel intimidated at joining this, because you can be a huge source
Yes.
of learning. I like when parents and teachers and people in the field keep my feet on the ground, and it's like, remind me. That's all fine for you, Susan, behind your video camera. And you can do the same sort of thing for schools and have that voice. We would love to have you join.
Yep.
Learn how to advocate from within. There are ways to advocate and impact change, and to do it positively, and understanding from within can be a really big starting place. So thank you, Stuart.
Okay,
Thank you.
guys.
We've got episode 12 coming for you soon. Take care, everyone. Bye
Bye
bye.
bye.